All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're trying to untangle the wealth of one of Pakistan's most powerful political families. So, how can one person's fortune be officially one number, but unofficially something hundreds of times bigger? We're going to put the official documents up against the staggering unofficial claims to see what's really going on.
Let's start with the number that always seems to grab the headlines, $1.8 billion. This is that huge, unofficial, and unverified figure that has swirled around Asif Ali Zardari for years, pretty much shaping public perception and political debate. But where in the world does a number that big actually come from?
Well, here's the puzzle, right? That massive number is worlds away from anything you'll find in an official record. So what's the real story here? How can two financial pictures of the exact same person be so radically different? Let's break it all down.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll lay out the puzzle itself. Then we're going to dive into that unofficial story, the one behind all those billion-dollar claims. After that, we'll get our feet back on the ground with the official declarations to see what's actually on paper. Then we'll decode that massive discrepancy, and finally, we'll see how all of this creates two very, very different financial stories for father and son. So let's kick things off with Section 1, the wealth puzzle. At the heart of this whole thing is really a tale of two wildly different numbers. Let's put them side by side just to see how stark this contrast really is.
So on one side of the scale, you have that massive unofficial estimate, $1.8 billion US. And on the other side, his official declaration, around 2 billion Pakistani rupees. Now, just for some perspective, that's roughly 7 million US dollars. The gap between those two figures isn't just big, it's astronomical.
Which brings us to Section 2, the unofficial story. So, where does a number like $1.8 billion even come from? Well, it's built on decades of allegations and media reports of a massive global portfolio of assets. Let's take a look at what that portfolio supposedly includes.
So this unofficial story, it paints a picture of a truly global property empire. We're talking about a massive estate in Surrey, prime properties in London and Dubai, an apartment in New York, and even a chateau over in France. Now, it's absolutely crucial to stress that these links, they come from years of media reports and old court allegations. They are not assets you're going to find on any official declaration form.
And when you look at the unofficial narrative for father and son side by side, you can see two totally different stories emerge. For Zardari, the allegations are tied to global business, and they generate just immense controversy. But for his son Bilawal, the unofficial estimates are far, far lower, and the source is pretty consistently attributed to family inheritance, which, just generates comparatively less controversy.
Okay, Section 3. Let's pivot away from the allegations for a moment. Let's get to the official side of the story, the official declaration. What assets are actually declared on the books, according to the documents?
And this is where it gets really fascinating, because on paper, their declared wealth is almost identical. Zardari declares about 2 billion rupees from things like property and business interests. Bilawal declares a very, very close 1.9 billion, also from property. But here's the crucial detail. A significant portion of his assets are officially listed as gifts.
This really gets to a fundamental truth when you're analyzing wealth in politics. What is declared on paper is rarely the full story of someone's actual real-world wealth. And that's not just an opinion, that is the key to understanding this entire gap.
And that brings us perfectly to Section 4, decoding the discrepancy.
Okay, let's finally break down exactly why these official and unofficial numbers are so incredibly far apart.
So let's be really clear about what unofficial wealth actually is. It's not a documented fact. It's an estimate. It's a number that tries to calculate the real market value of everything, including assets that might be hidden or registered under other people's names, or are simply based on old allegations that just keep circulating in the media.
There are a few key reasons for this massive gap. First, and this is a big one, assets are often declared at their original purchase price, not their current market value. Think of it like declaring a house at what you paid for it in 1990 instead of what it's worth today. Big difference, right? Second, ownership can be hidden inside complex webs of companies or offshore entities, which makes assets incredibly difficult to trace back to just one person. These are just some of the factors that can create that huge difference between the official number and that real-world estimate.
And that brings us to our final section, two fortunes, two stories. Because after everything we've looked at, two very, very different financial stories emerge for Asif Zardari and his son, Bilawal.
So here's the core takeaway. For Asif Ali Zardari, The narrative is really defined by all that historical controversy and this massive gulf between his official filings and the unofficial allegations. But for Bilawal, the story is different. His wealth, while extremely high, is largely declared and openly attributed to family inheritance and gifts.
So, we'll end with a question for you to think about. In the world of politics and public perception, which story actually carries more weight? Is it the black and white numbers on the official documents? Or is it the persistent and widespread narrative built from all those unofficial allegations? That's a question that gets right to the very heart of transparency and power.